for joining us again on this Thursday. This is week number 3 of our virtual interview series. We have had some absolutely amazing guests that have talked about their careers in the entertainment industry. And today we have another awesome guest. If you would like to see our full guest lineup, you can visit our website at www.reachandteach.rocks, ROCKS. We're excited to get started today. I do want to remind you that we will have a Q&A session at the end of this interview. So if you have questions for our guest, drop those into the chat, drop them into the comment section, and we will make sure that your questions get answered by our guest today. So let's go ahead and get started. Amanda, it is so nice to have you.
So good to be here. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Would you mind taking just a few minutes to tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and where you're from?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Amanda Greco, and I have lived a lot of different places. For the last 20 plus years, have been working in the sports and entertainment industry. And that has taken me across the country and actually around the world. So I've had so many fortunate opportunities to see so many different people and cultures that I've loved by product of, just my work. And right now I am a freelance event producer. So that basically means I could produce an Olympic event. I could produce men's March Madness for NCAA tournament, volleyball events. Tonight I'm producing a virtual event for NFL on for the Browns and Bengals games. So I do a little bit of everything, but primarily I began my career working for the Utah Jazz. That's where I'm from. I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah, and had the opportunity to work for the WNBA team that was there at one point first. That was my door into, my door into sports was working for the WNBA. And then they also were owned by the same people that owned the Utah Jazz. And I started out with thinking I was going to use my degree, which was in public relations, but I ended up finding out that there was this whole nother category of working in sports that involved the event presentation and the experience that people have when they go to games and events. And I thought, that looks like a lot of fun. I loved working with writers and I loved, that whole background, but this was a lot of fun, this group. So I thought, I want to investigate this. And so I started asking around, and they gave me an opportunity to enter in at a coordinator level for the Utah Jazz. And I kind of just worked my way up from there. In 2002, the Salt Lake hosted the Winter Olympics, which I knew nothing about winter sports. I had watched some figure skating, skiing, of course, but basketball, football, those were my sports. The rest I knew nothing about. And a friend of mine from the Jazz said, hey, you should go work for them. This could really open some opportunities up for you. And I thought, no, I'm not going to do that. Like, I don't even like, winter sports. And she kept on pushing me. And thankfully I listened to her and I ended up being a venue producer for the figure skating venue and the short track event. So I was able to produce a venue for the Olympics, which was crazy cool. And I got to call like gold medal ceremonies, when they raise the flags for the different countries and the athletes are on the platforms, which was a dream come true for a little girl who really wanted to be an athlete, but didn't have the accolades to be an athlete. I used to pretend, I'd get the mason lid jars and make myself little medal, to hang around my neck. And so the opportunity to actually call that in real life was really a dream come true, especially in my hometown. So from there, I went to Los Angeles and worked for the NHL team there, the Los Angeles Kings. Got to do a lot of really cool things there. The parent company there, their name is AEG, and they not only own the Staples Center and the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Lakers, they own all these facilities across the world now. So while I was there, I was able to call boxing events and track and field and tennis and, all these soccer, these sports that I knew nothing about, but ended up really enjoying the atmosphere and the experience of doing that. And then from LA, there was actually a lockout. So this was 2004. Yep, 2004. There was an NHL lockout. They knew there wasn't going to be a season. So any event presentation person kind of got furloughed, a lot of, just kind of laid off temporarily until the seasons came back. Well, I couldn't live in Los Angeles without a job. It's really expensive. So I was started looking around, and actually my boss in LA said, hey, I know they're looking for someone in Cleveland at the Cavaliers. And I thought, well, Cleveland, like, you know, when you grow up on the West Coast, like, how am I going to move all the way across the country to Cleveland? But it was also the second year of LeBron James' NBA career. And I knew that obviously he was going to be an exciting person to be around. So I thought, well, let me try this. And I actually knew who ended up being my husband down the line. My husband was working there at the time. I knew the guy that was the mascot, both really great people. And I thought, okay, let me go give this a try. And I'm so glad I did, because I ended up spending 9 seasons with the Cavaliers, and I just loved it. It was so great. And we got to see, you know, the growth of not only LeBron as an athlete and the team as an athlete, but also as the experience and the atmosphere at the Quicken Loans Arena at the time it was called. We got to see that expand and really grow and become something that people wanted to go to the games because of the stuff that we were doing, you know, obviously to see LeBron and the guys play, but to also see what we were doing in the stadium, which was a lot of fun. And then from there, I ended up going to do another Olympics in Vancouver, did the same venue, figure skating, short track speed skating. And then I became a full-time freelancer. So I've done the Olympics in Rio. That was a summer Olympics, which was a cool experience to do the other sports. And started doing March Madness venue producing for their events when, you know, Final Four and all those rounds leading up to the Final Four. Volleyball, like I just kind of do whatever comes my way because I love it. And I've been really fortunate to be part of all of these events.
I love hearing these stories. That's probably one of my favorite part of interviewing guests is seeing the connections and how, you know, what you think you might start out doing is completely different from what you actually end up doing. And it's really making those connections and meeting new people that makes all the difference.
100%. That is one of the biggest lessons I have learned is take the opportunities, you know, even when you think, maybe I don't want to do this or I'm scared, especially if you're scared, take the opportunity because those moments are the ones where it's like they really start defining and making you into who you're going to be. If you always stay safe and in your comfort zone, you're never going to grow. You're never going to like sit back and be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. Like, you know, I'm from a very small town. My parents have no connection in sports whatsoever. And they thought I was crazy when I wanted to go work for sports because they didn't know anybody. They thought it was kind of like for people that know people, you know, and we didn't. And I just made it happen because I really wanted to. And I was scared to death, believe me, on those interviews. I was scared to death to even like submit my resume. But I'm so glad that I did because it led to such a fun life and such a fun career.
That is such good advice. I love that so much. If it scares you, do it. 100%.
Absolutely. 100%.
Yes. So I know you talked a little bit about producing these big sporting events. What exactly does that mean? What does that look like in your day-to-day activities? Can you kind of take us through what those steps of producing an event is?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So anytime you go to any event, but especially a sporting event, typically everything that you're seeing, so I will use the Cavaliers as an example. So we would schedule out everything from lighting cues to music cues to videos, what you see on the video board, to pyro. We would have these giant flamethrowers that we would use during introductions, dancers, promotions. All of that is, you know, put together months ahead of at a time. So you're working with corporate sponsors. You're working with ticket sales to make sure you're taking care of your season ticket holders and your ticket buyers that come to these games. Because it is all kind of a community. You want to make sure everybody feels like they're really part of why they're there. And then you're also like trying new things out. We tried so many different promotions and videos that we thought in, you know, the brainstorming portion of the journey, they were awesome. And then when we did them, we're like, oh, that was really not great, you know, and you change and you kind of go forward, but you script everything out. And we would plan with all these different people. I would actually put it on a spreadsheet. And then come game time, I would sit, for the Cavaliers, for example, I sat right next to the court on the scorer's table. So I don't know, you guys are probably a little bit, this is probably before your time, but LeBron James used to do this thing. It started in Cleveland where he would take the talcum powder before the game and put it on his hands and he'd throw it up in the air. And the powder would go everywhere and it would always go all over me and my headset and my script. And I'd be like, ugh. But it was cool. And so then I would be on headset and I'd be communicating with basically a direct line to all the people that run the different areas of the production. So the lights and the videos and the dance team coordinators and all these people. So I'd say, for example, all right, in 2 minutes, we're going to stand by to do the open video, stand by to roll video, stand by pyro, hit pyro. You're just kind of constantly giving cues. Now, you go on the script and you kind of go, down the script as the game unfolds, but also you realize that the game is going to change. If your team is getting blown out or if your team's doing really well, you're not necessarily going to say, okay, we're going to stick to what we have on the script, and you're going to react to what the fans want you to do. So if the fans want to cheer and, there's been this amazing play and the crowd goes crazy, you're going to just play some great music to help keep that energy going and maintain. You're going to have the video guys out there capturing the fans. So the fans see themselves on the video board. They feel rewarded for showing love for their team. And you kind of just fill off the vibe of what's happening for your spectators. So that's a general gist. You can kind of apply it to all these different sporting events. Crowds are different. Crowd sizes are different. But each sport and each event that you do kind of has that same guideline of planning for it, scripting it, writing it down, executing it, and then being able to, go with the flow and change as you need to go as the event proceeds.
That is so interesting. I love sports. I've been to several sporting events, and it's one of those things that when you're in the moment, you don't realize that so much planning and so much work went into making you feel special, really.
Yes. Yes.
So, as a fan, I love that, our students are being able to get kind of a behind the scene glimpse of this is what it takes to make that full fan experience enjoyable. That's awesome.
Yeah. And there's so many things, April, we were talking about earlier that not necessarily even with event presentation in sports, there's so many different types of jobs. So I love being behind the scenes. Being on video right now is killing me, just so you know. It's not my thing. I love being behind the scenes. Some people love being in front of the camera. You've got the talent that want to be the MC or the PA announcer. Those people, you're working with that. But then you also have outside of, my world, you have accounting, you have HR, you have PR, you have facility operators. There is literally hundreds of thousands of people that work on these events, especially when you're on a bigger scale like March Madness or the Olympics, that, everybody's role is super important, and we all have to work together. We all have to be on the same page. And then, the end result is you want to have an awesome experience for your fans and for your athletes. And, if you're interested in sports, there's just so many avenues that you can go. That's one reason why I really love this industry.
That was my very next question. What are some careers that you as a high school student maybe had no clue existed, but as an adult you have seen that, wow, you can have a job doing that?
Well, for sure in high school, I was a huge sports fan and a huge Utah Jazz fan. And I used to watch the games all the time and just go crazy. But I thought there's no way in the world that I could actually ever work in sports. So when I went to college, I went with the intent of I was going to get into the medical industry. And about 2 years into college, my sister was doing an internship with a media group. And she mentioned to me, people actually work in sports. Is that something you'd want to do? And I realized that my college at the time didn't offer a program. So I transferred to the University of Utah. They did have a public relations in sports program, kind of a subset of their public relations degree. So I thought, well, that sounds intriguing. I would really like to do that. So, I went and I would go 2 games. I'd buy the cheapest ticket I could. I'd sit at the very, very top. And I wouldn't even watch the game anymore. I started watching what all these other people were doing during the actual game. And I thought, this is what I want to do. So as luck might have it, a PR, I think he was the vice president for the Utah Jazz, came and spoke to my class at the university. And he did this presentation. At the end of the class, he said, does anyone have any questions? And again, I don't know where this came from, but I'm grateful. I raised my hand and I said, can I work for you? And he kind of was taken back because that's not what he was going for. But he said, well, hey, as a matter of fact, you could come interview. We need some help because the WNBA had just started and the NBA, the Utah Jazz, they were going to the NBA finals. And it just happened that it kind of overlapped at the same time. So I came in and started talking to him. Working in public relations, I kind of knew was out there. And once I got my internship with them, I saw, just like we were speaking about earlier, just how many jobs were there. And what I do now, I had no idea that even existed. You can have fun putting together events and work in sports and get to watch sporting events for your job. Sign me up. I was all and I had no idea they existed. And, I think that's part of the cool thing. I think we're getting better just because there's more exposure to everything. But, when I was growing up, it was like, you're going to be a nurse or a doctor or a teacher, nothing wrong with that, of course, but it was like very limited. And then you get to see all these different opportunities. So, when you go out and you look at events or stores or whatever you're doing, just start observing how many people are working around you and how many things are happening around you that you don't even notice at first. And you'll see there's just so many different avenues to work and do something that you might end up loving to do.
That is wonderful advice. I love the part where you said, just observe, look around. When you go to concerts, when you go to sporting events, it's something that you're enjoying, take a moment and see who's working behind the scenes, see what jobs they're doing. And every single one of those people, that is a career path. It's a career opportunity.
100%.
Perfect advice. So you told us a little bit about your journey. I know, just like everyone else, maybe you didn't always have everything go your way. Could you tell us a little bit about some obstacles that you faced and maybe how you overcame those?
Yes, for sure. I have made so many mistakes, and I continue to make them. And it's I don't even think mistakes are a bad thing necessarily. I think my husband has a great phrase that I love, that if you're going to fail, do it fast and just kind of get it over with. And I think, be prepared to make mistakes and be prepared to be okay with that, because when you make the mistakes and when you kind of stumble, in addition to those points in your life when you're really afraid and really scared, those are the points where you really learn and you grow. I'm a people pleaser. I always want everyone to be happy. So in a live event, you have hundreds of things that could go right or wrong. And you don't have time during a live event to sit there and say, oh, that went wrong. And like you lose your composure. Because if you do that, the whole event's going to be off. So you just kind of take notes. And then after, what I think is really important to do is just recap and say, okay, what happened that worked great? And, let's continue to do that. What happened that wasn't so good? And what can we do to fix that? And then maybe, there's some things that are complete disasters. And you're like, let's just scratch that. We're done with that. But, it's taking notes and it's looking back at things and really like studying your craft, whatever that might be. I think that's a beneficial thing. And, something that I also learned a little bit too late, if I'm being honest, is when you're listening to people, especially, well, at any point, but especially when you're getting into a career, don't listen to respond. Listen to really take in what they're telling you. And when I was young, I was very ambitious and wanted to prove myself all the time. So I would just react to everything everyone was saying. And I didn't always get the best, reaction back because I wasn't listening to what was being said to me. Mm-hmm. And I think that you could apply that to so many things in your life, but it really takes a lot to be a good listener and to really understand what people are asking of you and want from you, and maybe don't even want from you. Maybe they're just speaking to speak. But I think that's something that I wish I would have learned earlier, is just to take a second and to pause and to try to take your emotions out of it, to try to take your, I want to prove everything to the world out of it, and just kind of listen for a second and then prove to the world, instead of react so quickly.
Yes, I think I 100% agree with you in building any career. When you can ask questions and truly listen to the advice and the response and take notes, refer back to those notes. And anytime you have a big project, just to analyze your success and your failure. Those are all great advice for students. And it's something that even we as adults, we have to work on all the time. And it's a progression for sure.
Yeah. For sure. Yes.
So if we have some students out there that's maybe interested in a career in the sports industry or the entertainment industry, do you have any actionable advice for them? Something that they could do today while they're still in high school that could maybe jumpstart that first step in their career?
Absolutely. So, I do this still to this day. I'll go to the store. I'll go to any event if they ever reopen, and I take notes constantly. What did they do that was great? What did they do that they could fix? And if I can, I write them down so I can refer back to them later. I'm always taking in, even like yesterday I went to the grocery store and I notice the communication of the woman that was checking me out and the man that was bagging my groceries. Like, they were so great at their jobs and they were so focused, but they never really like made eye contact, which again, like they're in a crazy stressful environment. The store was packed, but it's like, you can be really, really great at your job, but if you're not making the person you're entertaining, the one person or the 5,000 people that you're entertaining, feel welcome and involved, you're really missing the boat. So when you go out and you start talking to people, you can just start by basically observing people and listening to people and taking notes on their reactions. Because I think whether it's in a smaller group or a bigger group, humans want to feel appreciated, right? They want to feel like they're a part of something. And if they're a fan of a sport team, for example, it's really a great opportunity to be collective and everyone's on the same page and everyone can forget about, you know, their jobs or whatever might be going on crazy in their life and have fun. And that you can apply that to a very small level. You know, you're with your family or your friends, just observe people. And then if you are able to, if you live in a community where there's maybe a college or a minor league team, or even some of the pro teams have programs where if you just email or call and ask and say, hey, can I come in and talk to you? Can I come in and observe you? Can I jump in on a Zoom call and just listen? Just be a student of the career that you want to be and figure out like, oh, you know, maybe this isn't the way for me and maybe this is, or man, this is what I want to do. You know, I know 100%. There are a lot of really great people who work in sports and we were all at an entry level position at one point and we remember what that feels like. And so many of us want to help. But you need to extend, right? Like a lot of people don't know that you have this interest. They don't know that you want to work in sports unless you open that dialogue and say, hey, look, I'm here and I want to learn more. And I've seen so many people get jobs that way just from, you know, reaching out to someone and saying, hey, and that's how I got my job. I reached out at the right point and they needed help and I was really ready to go. So, you know, and add on to that, don't be too good for anything, you know, like my first job as an intern was literally, I would go around and scrape off stickers off of where the media were sitting. They would have assignments and they'd have a sticker with their name where they would sit for the game. And each game, my job was to scrape those stickers off and put new stickers on and clean up around if there was garbage or if the seat, you know, and it's like, well, this isn't why I went to college, you know, but that was part of the process of getting me to where I needed to be. So don't be too good to do the things that are asked for you. You know, take the opportunity to make the most of anything. And you'll go really far if you have that attitude.
Every single job is a stepping stone to a new opportunity. And once students are able to look at it in that way, even if you're working part-time at a fast food restaurant or at a hotel, every single job is a stepping stone to a new opportunity. So I love that you mentioned that. I love that you mentioned, you know, where you started. That's so important. And I want to add to the best advice that I've received in my career is just to ask. You never know when you're going to get that yes. And you might get 1,000 no's, but that one yes could make all the difference.
100%. And that's a scary thing to do, right? Like you're just like, oh my gosh, like I'm a nobody. And, you know, I remember feeling that way. Like I'm just this little dork from Centerville, Utah, who's going to give me a chance, you know, but someone did. And then you kind of have, and then it's up to you to keep on proving yourself. And I still do that to this day. I don't take anything for granted because, you know, no one cares how many Olympics I've worked or, you know, like the job I'm working now, they just want me to do a great job on that job, you know? So that's what you always have to continually prove yourself. And it's also fun, like to keep pushing yourself to be better.
Yes, I agree. Okay, so we are going to open it up to questions from anyone that's watching. If you have a question, drop it into the chat or to the comment section. And then I'm going to ask a few of pre-submitted questions from students.
Okay.
So the first one that we have is, what is the hardest part about producing a large event like the Olympics?
The hardest part. So there's so many different contributing elements to an event. So you have, for the Olympics particularly, you have athletes who have been preparing their entire lives, some since they were like 8 years old. For figure skating, it was like for a 1.5-minute routine, which is just crazy to think about, like the amount of time that they have sacrificed to be there for that moment. So the Olympics was always like, we want the fans to have a great time, but we need to make sure that it's a great time and a perfect time for the athletes themselves. So I think that, for my experience, that was the most nerve-wracking, because you think back and you're like, these kids, because they are very young, they're competing for something that they have dedicated their lives to, and it comes down to this 1.5 minute performance. We need to make this perfect. And so you rehearse how they're introduced, you rehearse how their music is played, you rehearse the things that happen before and after, and what they look like when they're in figure skating, that little box area where they all sit down after they perform and get their flowers. They call it the kiss and cry area, and which is something I didn't know until I started working in this field. But you want that moment to be perfect and all that to be perfect. And then, for their family and their friends that are in the stands, you want that to be perfect. And then also for the host country, the people that have bought it, you want them to have a great time. So that's a little bit hard sometimes when you're trying to balance all of that out to make sure that that moment happens correctly. But when you do nail it, it is just like, it's such a great feeling. You feel like you're one of the athletes that has been out there training your whole life because that moment was perfect. So it's very rewarding, but it can be very stressful for sure.
Well, that's a perfect lead into our next question. Our next question says, what are some details that you have to take care of that most people would never, ever think about with an event?
So many. So, when you're dealing with, music comes to mind right away. So you got to make sure that you're playing music that appeals to the masses, right? So you're never going to appeal to everybody. But I remember there was one point in conversation with LeBron James and his people, and they were like, the music you guys are playing is not what we want to hear. It's not what motivates us. So we start playing the music to appeal to them, and then we get all these complaints from season ticket holders that are like, I don't know what this is. I'm too old for this, And so you're like, oh man, how am I going to find a compromise? So we would find for the open introduction videos in particular, we would try to find a song that was maybe like a younger market demographic that had maybe the tune of like a older demographic market combined. We'd spend hours trying to find these songs to appeal to the whole group. And, and then you would just play something and, the owner would say, hey, this isn't what I want to hear. And so you play something else. And, someone's always kind of complaining about the music in particular is a big one, but you spend hours, and I mean hours, playing songs, studying lyrics, making sure that the artist that created the music doesn't have a bad history, because someone will link that all together, and it can be a little nerve-wracking, a little like, oh, come on now. But those are some things. And also, when you're talking about costuming for your performers, you have to look at does it fit your brand? Are they the right colors? Are they going to be the right fit? Do they look the best for your performers? When you're having interactive fans who are the people that in a pre-COVID world were throwing out t-shirts and whatnot, what do they look like? Are they presentable? Do they need new shoes? Do they, all these different things, because all of your performers, outside of the athletes themselves, they're representatives of your team, and they are more often than not the people that can come in contact with the fans on more regular. So you want them to always look the best and be most professional. And, so you're always studying all these different things to make sure that they're representing the brand and the team the way that you would want them to.
That is so interesting to think about. And, brand consistency, having a positive image for your brand, that's really important. But I've never thought about the shoes on the people that throw t-shirt cannons. And so that is, all the way down to the smallest of details, having that brand consistency is very important.
Yes. And also now, of course, social media, you have to be a little bit more aware of what these people are saying. Because, social media, everybody's as individual. They're not representing the brand. But if someone knows, hey, this person is a team member for your local team, you're going to go to them thinking they're representing that team, right? So if they say something inappropriate, it looks bad for your team. So you have to give guidelines. A lot of people choose to make their social platforms private for that reason, so they don't get us in much trouble. But that's another, area where you kind of have to just watch all the details and make sure that nothing's being said or represented in a way you wouldn't want them to.
That is incredible advice. And it's something that even as high school students, a lot of students don't think about, that even what they're posting on social media now can have long-term effects on a career that you want in the future.
100%. I know myself and so many people, when we've been looking for people to fill these roles, will go and look at their social media and say, oh, like this is not the same person that came and interviewed. And sometimes it works out great, and they are, but like I would also echo what you say, April. Like, you really need to remember that this stays with you, even if you delete it. It's amazing what people can find. So just remember, and I'm sure you guys have heard this 1,000 times by now, but just remember, anything on the internet, think of it as permanent. And is that something that you want to be permanent in your life? Just be careful with what you're posting, and you'll be good.
Perfect. So we have time for one more question. Okay. And this question is, I want to plan a big event in my community. What would be my first step?
Ooh, great question. Okay, so you would need to find a location first, and you need to find out like how many people you expect or want to attend your event. And then that would determine your location, right? So if you're doing, if it's a sporting event, say you want to play in a 3-on-3 tournament, you would need to plan to find somewhere that has the opportunity to bring in the basketball standards that could host as many teams as you have wanted to do. So you have to look at the platform, just your blank slate of what you're working with. And then from that point, you have to decide, and your budget has to decide where your spectators are going to be, what kind of sound system you're going to have. Do you want to bring in lights? Are you going to do it during the day? Or are you going to do it at night? What kind of talent you want there? Do you need an MC? Do you need a DJ? Do you need ushers? Do you need people to help with fan facilitation? Are you going to try to encourage the fans to cheer with t-shirt tosses or, something of that like? So you have to plan like what exactly you want your event to look like. And once you have that big picture of this is what I ultimately want it to be, then you have to start dissecting, okay, how am I going to get there? How am I going to get the permits from the city to hold this event? How am I going to get the rentals to make this all happen? And then kind of go down the line like that. And, then look and see what kind of budget you're going to have to work with. All of this costs money, unfortunately. So you have to look and say, okay, if I do this and this and this, I have this much money. Am I going to be able to afford it? And then just take off from there, have some amazing support team and be ready to work a lot of fun and amazing hours, but a lot of hours.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for your time today. You have had so many good tidbits of advice that I think students are really going to grow from. Is there anything else you would like to add for students before we go?
I would just like to thank you guys for your time. This has been so much fun. And thanks so much, April, for the opportunity. I think just don't ever just say, oh, I can never do that, based off where you're from or your experience or any of that. Always believe in yourself. And if something really means a lot to you and if it's something you really want to do, go do it. Find a way, and, like I said, I'm from a really small town. I knew nobody. I'm not good at sports, but I just kept on trying and kept on pushing and kept on working. And I really got to and continue to have an amazing career because I just kept on believing in myself. So I encourage you guys to believe in yourselves as well.
What an incredible testament. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you for everyone that joined us today. We will have a new guest with our next episode next Thursday. So be sure to visit our website so that you can see our full guest lineup. And y'all have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.